Good morning and welcome to the OBX Wave Report on this January 1st, 2023. Happy New Year. It's a sleepy New Year's Day, as is pretty typical. Everyone is all partied out after the holiday, I'm sure. Everyone is recovering, trying to get their energy back in the winter time, which can be difficult. And after having so much fun and doing so many things throughout the holidays, I'm sure we are all spent. And recently, I know a lot of people have been suffering from various holiday ailments. So it is time to rest, to recover, and to set our sights forward to the new year and embrace the new year with vigor and verve to enliven ourselves, to caffeinate ourselves, or just to sit here and relax with a kitten in our lap. Either way. So, welcome to the OBX Wave Report. Welcome to January 1st, 2023. And here at the OBX Wave Report, we do discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. Yesterday, we did just have one wave report, no supplementals, although I did write a bit of poetry over on the Robert Scribbler blog, a bit of natural poetry combined with some beautiful photographs by my wife, Catherine Lynch. So if you're interested in checking that out, head on over to robertscribbler.wordpress.com and take a look at some beautiful photographs of clouds and the natural environment here in Manio, as well as some beautiful nature shots. So in any case, welcome to the OBX Wave Report, and we are going to provide you with an assessment of waves across the Outer Banks, as well as the climate and weather conditions that impact the Outer Banks in the US East Coast. And for today, what we are seeing is receding swells along the east facing beaches, particularly, and the south facing beaches as well. And in the forecast, the receding swell for the east facing beaches is projected to continue at least for the next few days. For the south facing beaches, we have a little recession in swell height down to about the 1 to 3/2 to 4 foot range. And then waves kicking up again over the next couple of days as impulses move off the US East Coast and bring winds and swells in from the south. For the east facing beaches, conditions are predicted to tend to keep wave heights down through midweek, and we're not looking for any weather that is likely to cause higher surf conditions, larger wave conditions until possibly later this week. So generally, the trend for the Outer Banks remains one toward calm. Looking at the satellite picture for today from NOAA, we do see partly cloudy conditions dominating over the Outer Banks today, with storm systems sweeping off to the north and east, bringing with it a frontal boundary that crossed through the Outer Banks yesterday and brought some stormy and rainy conditions with it for New Year's Eve. And then we have an impulse down here to our south and west that is moving across the central US and bringing stormy conditions there. Looking at the infrared satellite shot, we do see the frontal system receding off the US East Coast with a low pressure system running in toward Newfoundland, and then a second system over the Rockies and the central US, kicking off some storms and some snowfall. This system is expected to just march basically straight across the country, tap into some Gulf moisture here, and then bring some stormy conditions mid to late week for the Outer Banks. Another large impulse of stormy weather is trekking in toward the US West Coast, and that'll bring more stormy conditions for the US West Coast. West Coast has been hit with stormy conditions for a while now consistently, and the 8 to 14 day models are showing that the stormiest weather will tend toward the US West Coast, although precipitation amounts are projected to be above normal for both the US West Coast, the central US, and here in the mid-Atlantic over the Outer Banks. So overall, a generally stormy pattern for the United States, which will also tend to bring stormier conditions here to the Outer Banks over the 8 to 14 day time period, although in the weather models, we're not looking at anything too crazy. We'll keep a weather eye toward the weather models for you guys to let you know what's predicted, but so far, nothing too crazy yet. As for the near coastline wave conditions for the Outer Banks, swells are running in the range of about 4 to 5 feet just offshore, with the waves coming in from mainly the south here, and this is one of the reasons why the south-facing beaches are getting the better swell. This set of conditions is expected to continue for the next few days with a slight turn in the swell even as it drops, but swell still coming in from the southeast for tomorrow in the wave model. And then for the next day, turning a little bit more to the southeast, but swell heights predicted to fall again. And then wave heights projected to pop up a bit on the 4th, with the wave heights turning in from the south with a possible southwest angle to the swell as another front, and low pressure impulse is expected to form into the south here. So overall, the south-facing beaches are looking to get the better wave conditions over the next few days, with the north and east-facing beaches tending to see lower surf as well. Looking at our 3 choice areas for the Outer Banks today, we're going to start off at Jeanette's Pier as we typically do. And at Jeanette's Pier today, right now, we are seeing decent waves in the range of 2 to 3 feet. So rideable, thigh to waist, maybe even a few chest high sets coming in at Jeanette's Pier there. So nice surfing conditions with winds running offshore. The waves tend to be smoother and glassier, with a primary swell with those larger waves coming in at about 8 seconds, and the secondary swell with the much smaller waves coming in at 3 seconds. Winds with those 2 to 3 foot waves are out of the west with a slight northwest component. So those winds running offshore are at 12 miles per hour. Pretty light winds, glassy-ish conditions for the waves. So generally good rideable waves there at Jeanette's Pier right now. Air temperatures are 51 degrees, pretty cool. And the ocean water temperatures are 54 degrees. Make sure you have your cold weather protection up. I, with my 2-3 millimeter wetsuit, learned that the hard way a couple of days ago. So yeah, you're probably going to need hoodie, booties, gloves, the whole shebang if you want to maintain your comfort in the cold water, unless you're some kind of polar bear and you're just crazy, and which I am. My polar bear genes are not turning on apparently. So in any case, yeah, I recommend definitely the cold weather gear. Weather conditions are partly cloudy at Jeanette's Pier, with an expected high today of 57 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty warm conditions for this January 1st, this New Year's Day. Moving on down the Outer Banks toward Esterns, over here on the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge, we have larger waves in the range of 3 to 4 feet. So definitely nice rideable waves at Esterns. I hope I did not turn you off for today on the east facing beaches, because they certainly are rideable. They certainly are fun. It's just that the swell is predicted to recede over the next few days, and that trend is ongoing through today. But right now, at S turns, the waves are fun and rideable at 3 to 4 feet. The primary swell there is coming in at 10 seconds, with a secondary swell coming in at 13 seconds. The 10-second primary period, again having those 3.5 foot average wave heights coming in there. Winds are also out of the west northwest with a more westerly component. And this offshore wind is also helping to make the ocean conditions more placid and glassy. So a nice shape to the waves down there at S turns at present. Air temperatures are 59 degrees Fahrenheit, much warmer than further north as we typically see. And it's really interesting. You go just 15, 20 miles down the coast and the air temperature is 8 degrees warmer, according to this report. And then the ocean water temperature is also 8 degrees warmer at 62 degrees Fahrenheit there at S turns. Weather conditions are partly cloudy with an expected high between 55 and 60, and we're already mostly there with a 59-degree air temperatures presently observed at S turns. So I did mention the south-facing beaches getting a better swell, and this is in the forecast. At present, the south-facing beaches are getting about the same swell. And so we're going to go ahead and head on down Route 12 past Avon and down past Diamond Shoals and the Hatteras Light Station to Billy Mitchell Airport, which is now a very easily discernible feature for me here on these satellite maps after providing you guys with these wave reports on a daily basis. Billy Mitchell just kind of jumps out at me now. But right now at Billy Mitchell, wave heights are also in the range of 3 to 4 feet. So good, decent rideable waves in the waist to chest, maybe a couple of shoulder high sets coming in there at Billy Mitchell. The primary swell with those larger waves are coming in at 10 seconds, and the secondary swell with smaller waves are coming in at 7 seconds. Winds at Billy Mitchell are also out of the west, but with a southeast facing beach, the west northwest winds have a bit of a cross shore component, even though they are still primarily offshore. So we might have a little bit more chop in these swells, but I wouldn't say too much with those winds coming out at 10 miles per hour. Rather gentle winds, and the conditions there are also rather glassy, although probably not as glassy as with some of the east-facing beaches. Air temperatures are very pleasant in the range of 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ocean water temperature is also rather warmer. So I'd probably be okay with my 2 3 millimeter wetsuit down there at Billy Mitchell. I don't know, maybe we'll head on down today. Maybe we'll have a little footage for you guys. We'll see. But in any case, the ocean water temperatures are 65 degrees Fahrenheit down there at Billy Mitchell with those air temperatures at 60 degrees. So much warmer conditions. You're still going to want your cold weather protection, but you're not going to need as much cold weather protection as you would with the beaches that are further north. Weather conditions are partly cloudy down there at Billy Mitchell with an expected high today of 61 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, not too much additional warming through today as we are already past the 11 o'clock hour. Isn't that right, crew? I've got a kitten sitting here in my lap. He likes to listen to these wave reports. So overall conditions are rideable today across the Outer Banks, glassy with calm conditions, a decent base swell, and these conditions are expected to slowly see receding wave heights over the course of the day and then over the next couple of days, particularly for the east-facing beaches, with the south-facing beaches likely to get better wave, at least higher wave heights, as we have some stormy impulses coming in from the south that are more likely to kick up some swells. Now, as I typically do with the OBX wave report, I am going to provide the broader picture for you guys to give you guys some understanding of the underlying weather and climate conditions that are affecting the Outer Banks. And the Outer Banks is a part of the global system, so the globe is not disconnected. I know we get local weather and everyone wants to focus in on what's happening here now, but understanding the larger patterns does give us an understanding of what may happen in the future. And and we're gonna do a little bit of analysis for you guys because we've got some interesting changes. So first off, we're going to start with a global forecast system model run for the continental United States primarily, and the lower 48 in particular. And what we see is the storm system over the Rockies and the central U.S. sweeping into the Mississippi River Valley region by the 3rd, dredging up some Gulf moisture and firing off some rather strong storms here over the Mississippi and kicking in some snowfall toward the north and west. And then the system is expected to continue to move to the east and northeast with a strong frontal system draped south of a low pressure forming south and west, or deepening south and west of the Great Lakes, deepening a little bit, nothing, no bombification with this one, as it kind of meanders up here toward the Great Lakes. And then the frontal system just drags down across the eastern US and down into the Gulf of Mexico, tapping in those warmer than normal ocean surface temperatures. And whoa, hold on. Okay, that one got away from me. Here, let's let's back it up because I did want to talk about this frontal boundary, which is expected to linger over here over the southeast and create stormy conditions for the southeast for the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and into the 6th as the low pressure system kind of dissolves over the Great Lakes and transfers its energy toward the coastline, or more so toward the coastline, with a relatively weak low pressure system here developing here in the western portion of North Carolina by January 5th. And with this weather model, January 5th is just 5 days away. So the weather model is likely to be a bit more accurate, although 5 days is still a little bit out. And then the energy transfers offshore for a more coastal system by January 6th. And at that point, we're more than likely to see higher wave conditions for both the east and south facing beaches of the Outer Banks as the winds start to come in from the east more so. So that would be the end for the receding wave conditions by around the 5th or the 6th for the east facing beaches. And then for most of the 6th, the coastal low remains, and we have a kind of a coastal storm, but it's nothing too crazy, nothing too deep in this weather model in the January 6th timeframe, with the low kind of getting its act together as it moves off the U.S. northeast coast and then sweeps on up toward Newfoundland. Nothing major in the forecast here, but it is worth noting that we do have a coastal system in the forecast. And so we are going to keep our eye on that to see if there are any changes in the forecast for you guys. If the energy, if the system gets itself more organized and the energy in the system bumps up a bit, then we might have a rather uh, strong storm event to talk about, but that is not what the models are indicating. It's mainly indicating a relatively mild system. We'll see how things pan out, but that's what we're looking at for the continental US. And so I also do provide info or provide you guys with a little bit of commentary about the jet stream. Right now, the jet stream across the US is dipping down. There's no major deep trough. It's just more of a kind of general trough pattern across the US with a deeper trough in the west associated with stormier general conditions for the US West. US West has been getting hit with quite a lot of systems moving across the Pacific in a relatively strong storm track here. And so we've had strong precipitation events for the US West, and you probably heard some weather and weather commentary about that. It's worth noting that these ocean waters off the US Pacific coast are rather warmer than normal. I'll just go ahead and I think I have another ocean model set up showing sea surface temperature anomalies, but just to give you an idea about this storm track, how it's affecting the Pacific, significant wave heights off of Canada and Alaska are in the range of 27 feet, which is pretty big. And then I did want to talk to you about the sea surface temperature anomalies. So we're going to go down to a sea surface temperature anomaly map here. And we're seeing warmer, considerably warmer than normal temperatures across the northern Pacific, just south of the Aleutian Island chain. And that's helping to provide more fuel for systems as they track across the Pacific Ocean, pumping up their moisture levels, and then those systems subsequently dump that moisture on the US West Coast. And we're seeing above average precipitation levels for this time of year for the US West Coast. In some cases, very considerable above average precipitation. So overall, that's the main weather news for the US, and particularly in the storm situation. But overall, the weather for the US is trending towards stormier. And we see this trend reflected in the climate prediction center model forecast, which also shows warmer to much warmer than normal temperatures over the 10 to 14 day period for the US. But in particular, we see above average precipitation from west to east, with the highest above average precipitation in the US West, considerably higher than average. Nothing like too crazy, but rather higher than average precipitation levels. And this trend has been consistent. So we've just had consistently higher levels of precipitation in storm after storm after storm for the US West, whereas things in the US East here have tended to be milder. I've already talked about the ocean surface temperatures for the US West. And for the Outer Banks, why do we care about these storms coming into the US West? Well, if there are storms coming in to the US West, they, in a frequent manner, they do tend to track across the US and get to us here in the Outer Banks. And then depending on the East Coast dynamics, we might get a strong system. So far, that has not been the case, but I would also note that the ocean water temperatures off the US East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico are considerably higher than normal. And this provides fuel for systems if they do get organized. And just looking at the Gulf of Mexico here, there are areas in the Gulf of Mexico that range from 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, with even the broader Gulf of Mexico seeing 2 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit above normal temperatures. And then off the US East Coast, particularly off the US Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, sea surface temperatures are really considerably much warmer than normal, with some locations seeing ocean surface temperatures in the range of 16.5 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. This has been the case for a long period of time across the US East Coast. So if any major storm systems do develop, they have that energy potential coming off the Atlantic to tap into in the form of greater moisture levels and convection. So something to keep an eye on as we continue into the winter of 2023. Again, Happy New Year. Now, oh yes, let me back up here. There was one more little thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is a synoptic weather feature called the INSO cycle, and INSO tracks the periodic transition in the Pacific between the La Nina condition, which features cooler than normal sea surface temperatures in the eastern equatorial Pacific, and INSO neutral, which is about a wash as far as sea surface temperature anomalies, and then El Nino conditions, in which ocean surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific are warmer than normal. And El Nino and La Nina have global effects because the ocean surface in the Pacific is so large and it produces so much influence on weather patterns that affect the global system. What we've seen lately is that sea surface temperatures in the eastern equatorial Pacific are warming up. And what this means is that the prevailing La Nina conditions, which we have seen over the last few years, are starting to see a little bit of a change. And this has implications for spring and in particular summer. And La Nina conditions in the eastern equatorial Pacific tend to reduce wind shear for the Atlantic. And when that happens, it tends to favor tropical cyclone development in the summertime. A shift to from La Nina to El Nino tends to increase wind shear across the Atlantic during summertime, and that tends to suppress tropical cyclone development. What's happening now is that the El Nino pattern is starting to look like it's going to shift from La Nina, or these cool water conditions, in the eastern equatorial Pacific to more warmer than normal water conditions, or a INSO neutral, El Nino, La Nina neutral condition, or even an El Nino condition by summer. If that happens, then the potential for tropical cyclone development for the summertime tends to get knocked down a little bit. We're going to have to keep an eye on this. I did want to talk about it briefly, though. And one feature for predicting El Nino is the Kelvin wave pattern for sea temperature anomalies at depth across the Pacific. And so this model shows temperature anomalies in the western equatorial Pacific ranging well above average at depth. And this below surface, above normal temperature condition here in the western equatorial Pacific is moving east. As it moves east, it gets down under this cooler water here in the eastern equatorial Pacific and then begins to rise and then starts to hit the surface. And when that happens, we could see a transition to El Nino. And this thing is already on the move, this plug of warmer than normal waters at depth in the western equatorial Pacific is already on the move, already kind of heading toward the eastern equatorial Pacific. It takes months for these plugs of water to move and have their effect. But what NOAA is predicting is a tendency more toward an El Nino neutral condition as these subsurface waters begin to affect the surface waters in the eastern Pacific, and then a longer term, greater likelihood of El Nino starting to form by summertime. Something to keep an eye on because that has an effect on storminess in the Atlantic as well as on the general wave conditions for the Outer Banks. And we both track waves and storms, so we're interested in El Nino and La Nina and all the things that happen in the Pacific. I'm going to go ahead and I wasn't going to do this, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what NOAA is predicting here for the longer term. And so as you can see, we've had La Nina type conditions here in the Pacific Ocean since 2020, so nearly for 3 years now. And this model describes a chance for La Nina or El Nino or INSO neutral conditions over a longer 3-month period. So right now we're in the December, January, February, and we are presently experiencing La Nina conditions. And as we get into springtime, the El Nino or INSO neutral conditions are expected to dominate. And then as we get into mid to late summer, the likelihood of El Nino begins to increase. And that's the NOAA forecast at present. This is a long range forecast. So again, with all long range forecasts, we take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Going back into the North Atlantic, I do want to talk about some stormy conditions for the larger North Atlantic. We do have a predicted coastal low forming later this week. We're going to keep an eye on that for you guys. But there is an interesting tendency out here in the North Atlantic for strong storms to form near Greenland. And in this model, over the coming 10 days or so, we do see predictions for very powerful low pressure systems in the range of 960 or even 950 in the range of 960 or even 950 millibars forming near the southern tip of Greenland. And that's just something we might want to keep an eye on. It's an interesting feature that has an effect on broader ocean conditions across the Atlantic, particularly wave conditions. It's also a feature that's interesting for climate because sometimes these systems, these powerful storms, particularly if they get really strong, can tap into air far flung, particularly air near the tropics. And if these very powerful storm systems tap into the air near the tropics and hurl it up over the ice sheet, that does have a climate impact. It can be a feature of our changing climate and a feature of impact for the ice sheet, which also um, contributes to sea level rise. Particularly if Greenland ice sheet is melting more rapidly, then sea level rise here in the Outer Banks increases more rapidly, and we have more impacts here in the Outer Banks as well. So something we want to just generally keep an eye on. All right. So to sum up, we are, that's the Beaufort wind scale. So to sum up, we have rideable wave conditions here across the Outer Banks, with waves ranging from 1 to 4 feet across the Outer Banks, with the primary wave heights coming in the 2 to 3 to 2 to 4 foot range for most locations. And with a nice gentle winds, mostly running offshore for the east-facing beaches, contributing to a nice glassy swell. And over the next few days, we expect the east-facing beaches to see waves dropping off, and the south-facing beaches remaining for the best wave features for the next few days. And then we see a change in the weather as another coastal system develops and likely starts to kick up the wave heights by late week. So thank you for joining me for the OBX Wave Report for January the 1st, 2023. Happy New Year. I hope it is a wonderful new year for all of you. And please remember to do everything you can to save our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning, and to rapidly transition to the clean energy systems that are going to reduce the impacts to our wonderful coastlines that we all love. Those clean energy systems at present being wind, water, solar, and battery systems primarily for both energy storage and electric vehicles. So thank you for joining me again.